To me, the coronavirus has been one of the biggest reminders of why you need a second passport. From the personal fallout, quarantines and restrictions and regulations and travel delays and restrictions, to the economic fallout, which has been substantial. In this video, I'm going to shatter some of the myths that many people have of why they don't need a second passport, and use this as motivation for you to go out and get your second passport. Hey guys, I'm Andrew Henderson, and if you want to learn more about how Nomad Capitalist helps successful people get their second passport and do some of the cool things that come with that, from lower taxes to better investments, go to nomadcapitalist.com. But for me, the coronavirus was a real wake-up call for the stuff that we talk about here, because it reminds us that you have to act before it's too late. You know, I've talked before to the idea that people say, well, I'll get a second passport, or I'll move overseas, or I'll diversify my assets to other countries when things get bad enough. And usually people talk about things getting bad enough as, taxes go up. That can happen at any time. They talk about political changes. They talk about threats to their personal safety. But for me, the coronavirus was something where no one really needed to interfere. A virus came out and governments reacted. They locked people in their homes. You were prohibited from traveling, sometimes just based on by where your passport was from, not based on where you were coming from or going to. A lot of restrictions applied, and a lot of people lost money, particularly those who weren't diversified. Now, the reasons to have a second passport don't just have to be a virus or a pandemic. They could be any kind of event that changes the course of your country or changes the course of your world. But what I think is very interesting about the virus in general is that it exposed what I've been saying for years are some of the fault lines in Western countries, where a lot of you are from. You've seen countries in Europe that were touted as some of the best places to live in the world. They have a romance associated with them that makes people want to move there, and they are often recommended as retirement destinations. And yet we've seen their healthcare systems are fatally flawed. Here in Malaysia, I saw a statistic at one point that 85 out of 1 million people were infected. You go to places like Spain, you go to places like Italy, that number was over 2,000 people. And you saw death counts that were much higher. Now, I don't take any satisfaction in that. It's very sad what's happened to people, and some of the ways that people couldn't even say goodbye to their loved ones in some of these places who were affected. Some really sad things. But for those of us who make it through this, I think it's important to learn the lessons that, when the house burns down, you can't buy fire insurance anymore. There are several factors. Some of them are myths, some of them are rationalizations, but they are factors that impact why I think a lot of Westerners don't see the need for a second citizenship. Number one is, if you live in a country where you've never seen chaos, you might think, hey, this is what comes with living in the best country in the world. And yet, so many of the countries that have been, touted as the best countries in the world, the United States, some of the European countries have been the ones that were hardest hit, had the most restrictions, had the most aggressive penalties and the highest actual medical toll. And, this is fascinating to me, because having traveled all around the world and lived in the world over the last 13 years, what I've really found is I like associating with a lot of different people. But what I really enjoy coming from the United States, where we have not really dealt with a lot of adversity, is meeting people from China, from Russia, from the former Yugoslavia, people who lived through, the fall of the USSR and others, people from all over the world, India, etc. Because these people have oftentimes seen more adversity. When you lived through the 90s in the Soviet Union and you don't have any food to eat, you know what adversity is like. When you live through a country like what happened in Yugoslavia, where you have hyperinflation and people are rushing to cash their paychecks and get it home just so they can buy food and buy consumer staples, you've seen some adversity. And I think that's why a lot of those people in those countries have realized that they need to be diversified. and they are not going to trust their government to solve the problem. Even though some of those countries, like Georgia, for example, have become among the most pro-business and safest countries in the world to live, the people there still remember, they don't necessarily trust their currency. And, while it's true, the US dollar has been the world reserve currency for some time, it doesn't always have to be that way. That's the second rationalization. That's the second myth, is things will never change. One thing that I've seen the opposite direction is countries that have ascended from nothing, from poverty, to become great countries that are highly livable. I always give the example of Malaysia. You look out my window in Malaysia, 30 years ago, it would be a totally different picture. And you can't say that about New York City. You can't say that about London. Certainly these places have evolved. But when you compare the amount of growth, what people don't understand is they can go the other direction. Steve Bannon, who was a former advisor to Donald Trump, said, we hollowed out the middle class in the United States, and we in turn built a middle class in Asia. Now, he said that like that was a bad thing. I think people in Asia deserve to have a middle class. I don't think they deserve to be toiling in poverty their entire lives. I think they deserve the right to drive cars and live in nice homes and travel around the world too. And so you're seeing both sides of it right now. And that's going to affect you eventually. Now, I don't think that, the US or the British passport is going to become a bad passport anytime soon. In fact, I said that if you're worried about Brexit impacting the quality of your British passport, not to worry. Okay? If that's your reason for getting a second passport, you just get a residence permit in Europe. So I'm not trying to say that the West is falling apart, especially if you're successful. But if you think that things will never change, and number three factor is if you think that the laws will never change or the government will never ramp up the force that it uses, then that's also a mistake. This coronavirus and the response to it has, I think, encapsulated a lot of the things that are potential concerns. If you can't leave your country because no other country wants to take you because you don't have any other residences or citizenships, you might be stuck, and it might not be a virus. It could be a civil war. It could be some kind of financial turmoil. We've seen a number of countries that have made it difficult, if not in law, in practice, for citizens of Venezuela to get in. Venezuela has an excellent passport for visa-free travel, but I can guarantee you, if you show up in London with a Venezuelan passport, you're going to get the third degree. They're not just going to whisk you in the way they would someone from another country. And how long ago was it that Venezuela was doing just fine, right? This has happened all over the world. We've seen it financially, where people were boxed in countries in Europe. We've seen it in Argentina. We've seen things in Asia. We've seen it all over the world. And so to me, this is a wake-up call. You have to act before it's too late. You can't imagine that you're going to have the opportunity the next day and the next day and the next day. That's something I see among folks from the West. And listen, I'm not blaming folks from the West. I'm from the West, and so I understand the mentality that you figure, hey, there's always going to be food on the shelves. There's always going to be gas at the gas station. There's always going to be things available to you. I can tell you, if you're not paying attention to how people in other countries, particularly China, the Middle East, and Russia, but also now Latin America, also parts of Southeast Asia, also parts of Africa, how they are diversifying and getting their second passports and potentially driving prices up, even as supply increases. If you're not seeing that, then you're going to think, hey, these opportunities will always be available. And even if the U.S., even if some crazy guy gets elected, wherever it is you live, U.S. or otherwise, even if that happens, even if there's a virus scare, even if, half of my country gets infected, even if, some big thing happens, I'll always have this opportunity. To me, a big global event like this should change that perception and show you how quickly things can change. If you're facing restrictions, if you're facing being stuck somewhere during something like the coronavirus, the fastest passport on earth isn't going to help you, especially when government offices are shut down. You need a plan in advance. And so what I tell 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs, 7- and 8-figure investors, is take a little bit of what you have, go out and buy yourself citizenship insurance. It could be a financial plan against some high tax and spend politician. It could be a plan against something where you want to have a safe haven in another part of the world. I'm not a doomsday guy. I'm not stockpiling 5 years of tuna fish cans. It's a big thing around my house. We have a bunch of tuna fish cans now, but I went on 5 years worth of tuna fish cans. I still live in cities. I'm not predicting the end of the world, but what I'm saying is things can happen that could be an inconvenience. Things could happen where you and your nationality could be stereotyped, and even if you don't match the stereotype, even if those things that they're protecting against don't apply to you, you're going to want protection because you're going to be in the pool with everyone else. And so if you have some money, go and set up a residence that maybe leads to citizenship. Maybe you go and make an investment in real estate or government bonds or starting a business or hiring people or doing something that leads to citizenship. Maybe you make a citizenship by investment. I was talking to a guy the other day. He said, Andrew, right now I got a couple $1 million. Let's do a residence and let's wait it out for 3 or 4 years. He says, but I've got a company, building up, got some interest, got some nibbles, might be able to sell it for $60 million in the next year. He says, then I'm going to go out, I'm going to buy a really, high quality passport. I'm just going to do citizenship by investment and get myself covered, right? So this is kind of like, to me, the conversation about going out and buying precious metals at a certain, level. Keep 5 or 10 or 20 or whatever percentage of your net worth you want in precious metals as a hedge, as an insurance policy, because, currencies have not done so well over the years. Go and take off a smaller percentage of your net worth, pay a little bit of legal fees, the same way you would have a will in case you die, because you're going to die. And you know what? Something's going to happen where you might want a citizenship insurance policy too. Go out, pay some legal fees, get something set up. We do it for folks every day. I think that an event like this should really show you the speed at which things move and the fact that no matter where you live in the world, it can happen there. I'm not saying things won't recover. I'm not saying you're going to be at a disadvantage forever. But if those things happen, you will want options. Having options is important, and having more than one citizenship, to me, is one of the best ways to have options. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.